Cops of Reddit, what famous people have you pulled over and how did it go down? I gave Werner Herzog a speeding ticket in the Hollywood Hills in the early 2010s. He was very polite and even shook my hand. Nice fellow. My dad was a cop. Pulled over none other than Marilyn Manson for an unsafe signal lane change. He was bragging the day it happened in the early 2000s. Said he was nondescript and low-key. Apologetic and didn't act like a big shot above the law. My dad pulled over Clint Eastwood. I guess this was just after they started requiring licenses to drive motorcycles in California. He pulled him over because he was driving squirrely, like he didn't really know how to ride. His response to license issue was, "Man, next thing you know you'll need a license to ride a horse." My father was a police officer for 27 years, and in one day he pulled over Paul Newman, who, apparently, was notorious for speeding. So, my dad goes to cite him and gets a call for an accident that needed assistance down the road. Then sometime shortly thereafter, my father pulled him over again and Newman allegedly groaned, "Not you again." Not a police officer, but I was a NYC park ranger in Central Park. I asked Christiana Amanpour from CNN to put her dog on a leash and she said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "I don't care who you are. Put your dog on a leash." I used to live in Bergenfield, New Jersey a few years back, and I think Chris Rock lives there, or Englewood, somewhere in Bergen County. My buddy was a Teaneck cop and said he pulled him over for going 55 in a 30, and NJ is mad strict with driving. He said Chris was awesome and even gave him an autograph after the speeding ticket. Former police cadet and dispatcher here. I was on a ride along and was told this story. So this officer pulls this car over for speeding. She then suspects the driver of being drunk. She calls in his driver's license to run it. The dispatcher tells her, "You have Nick Nolte pulled over. Do you know who he is? He's a movie star." The officer is young and doesn't know who Nick Nolte is. Turns out he wasn't drunk. He was just being Nick Nolte. She gave him a warning and sent him on his way. Not a cop, but I was working as a lifeguard and we had the beach red flagged no swimming for rough surf. There was this girl swimming, so I hopped on my ATV and headed down to call her out of the water. Her swimming was weird. I couldn't put my finger on it right away. Part of determining whether or not I have to rescue someone is to evaluate the swimming stroke. She wasn't in obvious distress, just swimming around in her weird sort of way. I blow my whistle to get her attention and she starts swimming back to shore. At this point I should probably mention that we had a surf contest going on and there were a bunch of pro surfers in town because of it. She walks out the water and at this point I realize why her swim stroke was weird. She only has one arm. Now I've got to tell Bethany Hamilton that the water is too rough for swimming. My friend is a cop in Chicago and years ago he pulled over Sean Hayes for speeding on Lakeshore Drive. My friend recognized him from TV but didn't let anything on. As he was writing him a ticket, Hayes asked, "Do you watch Will and Grace?" But my friend just said, "Nope. Here's your ticket." I'm not a cop, but when I was in school one of the school cops was watching our class for a little while, and he decided to tell us about some chick he arrested a few nights earlier. He arrested some lady for drunk driving, and she kept screaming at him to look her up and that she's famous. He looked up her name, and it turns out she was on The Voice. He watched the video on YouTube of her singing terribly and being an ass to the judges. He arrested her and found out she was wanted in Louisiana, so he had her sent all the way from San Angelo, Texas to bumfuck nowhere, Louisiana. Moral of the story: shut up, you're not famous. My dad is a retired NYPD cop. Many years ago he pulls over a limo in Brooklyn speeding on highway zooming towards Manhattan. Driver pulls over and admits to speeding and begs my dad not to look in back. He naturally looks in back and there is Johnny Mathis and another guy stark naked going at it. Johnny Mathis begs him not to say anything and my dad says no prob. When he returns to precinct, there is an envelope there for him. 2 front row tickets to see him perform at the old Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center. He goes with his fiancée. Now my mom and I was born 9 months later. Thanks Johnny. If it wasn't for him, I might not even be here. I wasn't a patrol officer, but rather the sheriff's deputy at Aspen's Airport, Sardie Field. I had to threaten to tow both Kurt Russell's and Hunter Thompson's vehicles more than once when they left them where they weren't supposed to. Parked right in front of the airport. Hunter was Hunter and just mumbled and groused. And Kurt usually just waved and smiled. Dirty violators. The both of them. I can still remember Russell's license plate. VCD 711. My coworker wrote Wes Craven a ticket. He didn't know who he was, and so when he gave him the ticket, he just was like, "Here's your ticket, Mr. Craven." My coworker told me that if he knew he wrote a ticket to the Nightmare on Elm Street guy, he would have issued a warning instead. My coworker is also from Kosovo, so when he tells it with his accent it's extra funny. Kind of upset me that he would have given him special treatment if he had known he was famous. My father-in-law was a police officer for many years and often regales the story of how, during a routine traffic stop, he met the great Kit Duncan. Only local politicians. They've all been assholes and expected me to just let them go regardless of why I stopped them. Some got warnings. Some got tickets. One got arrested because she was drunk. I treated them just like I treat everyone else. Some of my coworkers got pissed about the arrest because she was on the county council and they vote on our pay raises. But DUI is DUI. I'd rather piss off a council member and miss out on a raise than let some drunk go and find out later they hit and killed someone. Once a member of parliament were detained and put to jail for being too wasted. After an hour this MP told me that she wants to get out, but I refused since she was still too drunk. Then MP said to me, "Don't you know who I am?" And I answered, "Yes, but don't you know as a lawmaker that it applies to everyone?" And slammed MP's cell door. She got pretty pissed but surprisingly didn't file any complaints against me. Some police officer pulled over Kit Harington once for speeding or something. He said he'd let him go if he told him if he's really dead in Game of Thrones. He told him. He let him go. True story. At least according to Kit. My friend's dad arrested 6ix9 Inner. We know. 6ix9 Inner told everyone about it already. My dad ran into Bo Jackson emerging from a patch of woods in camouflage carrying a bow, possibly poaching, trespassing right outside his gated community in a woods. Burr Ridge, Illinois. They just chatted about the large local buck they both apparently knew of, for a few minutes and parted ways. Personally also cop. I never dealt with anyone famous. Unless you count the kids of the Chicago Bears radio broadcaster, Jeff Joniak, indirectly. When I was a cop I pulled Blake Shelton over once. I walked up the window, went through my little spiel, "Hello, my name is Officer Juskvin with the city police. The reason I've stopped you tonight is insert crime. May I see your license and insurance verification?" He gives me his stuff and it's really late so I haven't even figured out it's him yet. I'm just thinking this guy looks familiar. He was really friendly and pretty apologetic, super nice guy. The first wanted to ask for an autograph or picture but felt like it would have been unprofessional. D'Angelo Russell. He was respectful and didn't mention who he was. I didn't know it was him till I recognized his name and looked him up. I let him go with a warning on some chicken shit window tint traffic stop. Sam Elliott has a ranch just outside of Brownsville, OR, which is just off to the left of nowhere. A buddy of mine is a deputy for the county, and has run into him in the store buying milk or whatever. One of my buddy's co-workers had to go out to the ranch to take a report. When Mrs. Elliott got bit by a dog or something. The next day, my friend pulled him over without realizing who it was initially until he ran the plate. When he went up, he greeted them, and asked how she was doing, and she was all, "Oh, that's so nice of you to ask. Everybody always wants to talk to my husband, like he's some movie star or something." I guess she wrote a letter to the sheriff about how thoughtful it was of him to ask and what a nice young man he was. My father-in-law ended up pulling over a terrorist who was on the FBI's 10 most wanted for expired tags. Within 20 minutes 2 FBI agents, SWAT and a Black Hawk helicopter arrived and arrested the guy. Not a police officer, but I've never pulled over a famous person. This is from Lewis Hamilton in his interview in Letterman. He drove a particularly loud sports car in London, and was promptly pulled over by a cop that told him as he approached Lewis's window, "Who do you think you are, Lewis Hamilton?" He didn't get a ticket. Former police officer here. I was on patrol when I saw a group of people trying to cross the street on a very busy and dangerous 4-lane highway in the dark. I pulled over and loaded them up and drove them across. It was the band, Till Tuesday. Nice people. I gave the long-haired guy early 2000s I believe from Hootie and the Blowfish a ticket for no leash on his dog. We were driving on a small beach island and he's standing on a side road with his dog and no leash. He told my partner and I he was in a band and we asked which band he was in and he told us. We both were like we've never heard of this band lying. I said Hootie, good luck with that, is it rap? And he laughed and said no. He was cool. Still gave him the ticket. I have the same name as someone famous. When I get pulled over by the cops it doesn't help me any. The fact I look nothing like them and live in a different country doesn't help. Elton John. Kind of similar. My dad had a seizure and one of the fire department guys was a retired NASCAR Truck Series driver. Dude was chill as hell and told some stories for me and my siblings to calm us down. Not exactly what you're looking for but relatable. My father was a repo man for a short time in Newark, New Jersey. He ended up getting a call to put a car on the hook for unpaid bills. As he put the car on the hook a man started running out to the street shouting, "Hey man, that's my car, don't you know who I am?" My father had no idea. The man then proceeded to tell my father that he's Redman. My father responded, "Yeah, well I'm white man, next time pay your bill," and drove off with the car. My dad pulled over Milwaukee Bucks player Ersan Ilyasova. He was going well over the limit and well over the pace that traffic was following. My dad was going to cut him a break until he blurted out in his Turkish accent, "I was just keeping up with traffic." Slapped a ticket on his ass for trying to argue over a petty ticket that wouldn't even make a dent in his $7 million a year contract. Not a police officer and not famous, but I was so high once that I drove by a cop standing by his car. He waved to me and I pulled myself over thinking he was flagging me down. Of course I'm not a police officer, but NASCAR driver Kurt Busch was pulled over once. He tried the "don't you know who I am" routine. It didn't work. For what it's worth he's a lot less stuck up nowadays. Don't you know who I am? No, I only watch sports. My dad once pulled over Bobby Bones for a taillight down Highway 37. Not sure what all went down before, but I do remember my dad quoting him, "Not again." Apparently it had happened at least 4 to 5 times before this happened and he needed to take that car to go get the replacement bulb. He hadn't noticed until after the morning. Not too interesting, but it's funny to think he was pulled over so many times for the same thing. I met and spoke with a lot of celebrities when I was a cop. As our jurisdiction covered a prominent nightlife spot and casino, never pulled one over, but met quite a few. The most memorable was Rick Ross. I had a racist old piece of shit lieutenant. We were in the middle of an initiative to ID and otherwise remove a growing presence of 9 Trey Bloods. This meant approaching a lot of black and white, and Hispanic, but this story was specifically about a black individual, so I only have one example. Apparently I must explain things like this because offended by everything and twist facts I know nothing about type of people individuals if they met the general description: sagging pants, face tats, cinchy Reds hat. The area banned bandanas and they started using the red hats to fly their colors. We would ID them, tell them they were not welcome dressed the way they were, so they could pull up their pants, take off the hat, and stay, or they could leave entirely. My partner and I recognized Rick Ross. He was with someone, and they were just enjoying a frozen cocktail. My lieutenant comes up and tells us we need to ID those 2 blacks. We're not about that. We tell him we know who that is. He's a successful rapper. We're not gonna harass him. Long story short, we were ordered and did as ordered, but I made it no secret to him while asking for his ID that we knew who he was. We enjoyed some of his music, and that we didn't want to harass him, but the one racist fart made us ID him. He was cool about it. With my partner and I still feel bad about having to harass him like that. Dude was legit just chilling. He said "F that place" and left immediately after. Smug-ass lieutenant came by smiling that he knew there was something wrong with them. He had $8K in his pockets, you ain't shit to him. My driving instructor was a former Missouri traffic cop. He told me a story about pulling over Tom Selleck while he was in town filming an episode of Magnum Pie. He wasn't rude. He just thought he could get away with it because he's Tom Selleck. Unfortunately, the cop pulling him over was the infamous Officer Ziegler. Cop here. We wouldn't really be able to tell you any stories, at least in the UK, due to data protection. I came here to lurk. But the more I realize, I don't know any of these celebrities. I once saw a cop pull over Chuck Norris. As he was in a good mood, Chuck Norris let the cop off with a warning. Did I just wake up in 2005? Former deputy. The county I worked in had a popular vacation area. A couple deputies met Tom Cruise. Said he was really nice. The county had a small airstrip near this vacation area. One night one of our deputies is patrolling and finds a running SUV just parked there at like 0300. Contacts the driver, who my friend reported as being kind of shady and not belonging in the area. Driver says he is waiting for Bill Cosby and is his bodyguard and driver. My friend does not buy it but says he will stick around for Bill Cosby to appear. Lo and behold, a jet lands a few minutes later and Bill Cosby gets out. My friend says he walks up to the truck and the driver says, "Mr. Cosby, this deputy would like to meet you." All Bill says is, "That's nice." Gets in the car and leaves. The way it was told is he was a snarky and rude asshole. We also had a porn star that lived in our county. I forget her name. She was like a D-list porn star. She was a mess and was always getting into it with her boyfriend. Had a drinking problem and was a real asshole. She got drunk one night and challenged one of our deputies to a fight during a domestic violence incident. He ends up tazzing her and popping one of her fake boobs. She sued and the county had to buy her a new boob.